welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a DIY Dollar Tree black and white Christmas trees. Two ways. We're going to use the wonderful little gingham fabric that the Dollar Tree now carries in black and white, but you can use whatever you want, and we're just going to use a piece of poster board. This whole project is going to run just about $2 for two trees. One of these trees at Hobby Lobby was $9.99 for the small one, $14.99 for the big one. Yeah, I don't think so. Now, granted, theirs is a metal armature, but the cone ones, the paper ones are fine. If you really feel like the need to put, maybe some ribs up there, if you want to get some skewers, you can go do that, if that makes you feel better. Not me. So what we're going to use is some spray glue for this first project. This is just Aleene's tacky spray glue. What I did was I put the fabric down, sprayed the paper, and then picked the paper up and sprayed the fabric. But I want to kind of not do it dry mount, because dry mount is sort of a very permanent thing, and I didn't want to pre-iron this fabric, so I'm just going to do sort of that rub and seal, kind of like we did, not steel, seal, kind of like we do with contact paper. We're just going to peel it up and rub out all of the wrinkles and the bumps. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to make sort of a fulcrum. It is so hard to craft and videotape on this table. Sorry. What we're going to do is just take a piece of string, and I'm going to put it at the end of a pencil, and then we're going to put part of the string at the corner. Now, how I'm determining the height is basically how much fabric I have. I went with how wide it goes to the connected to the corner of the paper, and I just swung around to the other side, and then you can go ahead and cut it out. I want to use a really sharp, this is a new scissor, because cutting through the fabric and the cardboard at the same time, you're going to require that. Now I'm cutting one side really close, and I've left like a ½ inch right there to overhang, just to give it a finished edge. I ran a bead of glue and just folded the paper down onto itself. And you want to make sure that that edge is on the outside. But what I'm doing now is I'm sort of manipulating the cone. I'm kind of shaping it, just training it. While the glue sets up, you want to be able to make sure that the fabric will stretch without buckling. And you're just going to do this slowly before you go ahead and connect it. Now, when you finally have it the way you want it, you're going to line up the two bottoms. The way I have it, actually, the cone didn't go to a point. The cone edge actually wrapped around, which was fine with me. And then I went ahead and I glued the bottom first, and then worked my way up, and that was it. For this next one, I was inspired by this cute thing that I saw on Pinterest. And I guess it was originally with ribbon. So if you do have this ribbon and can't find this fabric, obviously go right ahead and use that. But of course, I have the fabric and not the ribbon. So I'm going to use the scraps left over from what we did. And because I made it so tall, I actually decided to make a cone as big as I could get it. I ended up having to use another, about a third of a second fat quarter of fabric. But I really could have, like, in hindsight, I should have just stuck with the one roll of fabric. But you could do that. Just make your second tree smaller is really what I was trying to get to. But I really wanted this one to be nice and tall. So what I did was I just made the same cone without any fabric on it. Glued down the entire edge. Again, I wanted to make it really super tall, so that's what I did. Now I'm taking all of these scraps of fabric, and I'm cutting them basically 2 rows of check. One dark and one white, and I'm gone the whole way. And what I did then was I was trying to determine how big I made the loops, how many rows I would have to have. That's what that little measuring was. But then I decided to just go for it. I just started putting it down, laying down what I needed to. Basically, you just want to cut strips however big you want. If you have ribbon, you're just going to go ahead and cut it as wide as the ribbon. And then you want to be able to create how long you want your loops. This is not something that we're measuring. Well, I did measure, but it doesn't, my measurements won't necessarily be your measurements, is what I was going to say. So what I decided to do was to make it a white row, a black row, a white row, and a black row, and then made it twice as long, so I could fold it in half. But then when we started to get towards the top of the cone, I started to use the fabric a little bit more sparingly, but I'll show you that in slow motion towards the end. But I'm going to show you here in a minute in real time how we're going to go ahead and create these loops. So as I mentioned, I cut each strip the same length and width, and at first I wasn't really creating a pattern, but then I started to realize that it looked better if I always laid the fabric the same way. Basically, for me, it was to put a white row on the left, with the black square at the top. I know that that sounds silly, but it starts to, if you switch it back and forth, I felt like it took away from the buffalo checkness or the black and white check gingham part of the pattern, if that makes any sense. So then what I just did was I took the strips of fabric, I took a tiny bit of hot glue, I set my hot glue gun on low. As I've mentioned in the past, or I've mentioned recently, this is a Gorilla hot glue gun that is dual temp. A lot of times the glue guns are multi-temp, which means they'll use hot or low temp glue, but they really do run at high. A low temp glue gun is better because for fabric especially, it does dry quicker because it doesn't get it quite as hot, but it also won't burn you as easily, if that makes any sense. So what I did was I took all the strips of fabric, I took the bead of glue at the top of the strip and I folded it onto itself. Basically, I pre-made the loops. Now, one thing that I didn't do that I'm regretting, I did, and I think the best way would be to take a rubber band, is to keep my row uniform. As I started to go around, I started to almost spiral, and I actually almost started to spiral up, and that would have kind of been cool had I done that intentionally, just spiraled all the way up to the top. But I didn't do that intentionally. That was actually a mistake. But what I was thinking, if you took a rubber band and actually lined it up like with a measurement on the row just to keep it even, kind of like when you hang, not that everybody here would know, but when you hang shingles on the outside of your house, they sort of put a little trim board up there to make sure all the shingles are uniform. So I'm thinking we could have achieved that with a rubber band, and then we could have just rolled the rubber band up to the next row that we wanted to create and make even. Okay. So now I'm just going to continue. I'm going to use all the scraps that we have, and I'm trying to get all the best pieces that I can. Like I mentioned before, I basically have two sets of white and black, and then underneath would be folded a second set of white and black, white and black. So we're going to have 4 rows. The strip that I picked was 4 rows of white and 4 rows of black, and 2 rows wide. And then we're just going to run a little bead of glue at the top, and then fold it onto itself. And we pre-create as many of these loops as we can that we've cut, and then we can add them as we go. And that I found that to be the best to get sort of like a little rhythm, a little pattern going. So the other real tip, I guess it sounds silly to say, is I took a little bottle of glue, and I just used it to keep the cone from rolling. Sometimes when you start to get X number of fabrics on there, it wants to weigh it to one side or the other. So I just butted up a little full bottle of glue there to keep it from rolling, just to keep it steady. Also, whenever I got to where the seam was, I tried to always make sure that there was a piece of fabric to go over the seam on both sides, which would also help keep it closed and connected. I just used regular hot glue for this. I did not use the Gorilla hot glue. I had some sticks. I was going to go ahead and use them. Fabric and paper does not require anything as strong as Gorilla hot glue. I'll tell you that much. So now I've had to go into the second skein, fat quarter, as I mentioned. I'm just cutting, I end up cutting about 4 rows off, so there's still way more than half. But what I decided to do here, and I kind of could have done this before, was I made the rows a little shorter. What I did was I made, instead of doing 2 sets of each on both sides, I did 2 sets on one side and 1 set on the other, and I folded it basically onto itself at the halfway mark. And I will show you that in slow motion in a second so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But I just thought it would be a way to conserve the fabric and still create that little sort of balloon that happens at the bottom of the tabs of fabric, I guess. Okay. So now you can see here what I'm doing is instead of gluing the piece all the way to the top, I'm gluing it at the midway point. So I've taken I've folded it in the same spot. Basically, the front side that we see, that's not being seen right now, is going to be 2 sets of stripes. Okay, but this is just a way to conserve fabric. If your scraps are not quite as plentiful as mine were, you might want to go ahead and do that. Now, some of this, because this wasn't ironed, some of them did have like a mind of their own and wanted to flip up. But I think that adds to the character of it, in my opinion anyway. Now, the inspiration piece just ended with fabric on the top. I had 2 of the loops left over. I decided to go ahead and fold them onto themselves and almost create like a little, I don't know, like a little tuft at the top. But for the very last row, I took 2, or you could take 3 of the pieces that were that same shorter side, and I folded them in half just to create a row that was a little shorter. And I just wrapped them around. I ended up just taking 2 pieces around the actual tip of the point. And then I had 2 left over, so what I did was I cut them in half, I guess almost to create like a faux tassel. And I just rolled it onto itself and then glued that at the very top going up. I don't know why, I just felt like it made it look more festive. You could stop where the inspiration stopped at the top. Okay? And this is everything. I really love the way they came out. I think they're going to be a great addition to my Christmas this year. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed this tutorial. If you do, give this video a thumbs up. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to share with friends and family. Anybody you know might be interested in seeing how we made either one of these and how to save lots of money. And if you haven't yet, click subscribe. And when you do, a little bell will pop up. When you ring that bell, YouTube will let you know whenever I upload a new video. And don't forget to check out the playlist. We have a Christmas playlist and a DIY playlist on the main channel. And as always, you guys take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time. Bye.